All right, this is May 20th or so, and we're up in the woods, Rich Cove, a lot of poplar trees, uh, bloodroot, May-apples, ginseng, Solomon seal. Kind of see what's here, a lot of smilax. So there was no Chamaelirium here when I first moved here, and now you can see if you scan, we are within sight of about 50 plants. They're in bloom. It's an important herb for women's fertility. If you wanted to classify it into Chinese medicine, it has been considered to be a yang tonic for the female reproductive system. There are not a lot of other herbs that would come into that category. So it's wanted for issues around fertility, and I think Susan Weed or somebody says preventing miscarriage. So I want to look at the male and female ones. And then there's another one right there. And then right here we can see regeneration. So a little seedling, here's a seedling, there's another seedling over here. So they're definitely, there's some little ones right here. Looks like several of them right here that still have that kind of purple color that they get in the winter time. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Probably 5, 6. So it's doing a good job of reproducing itself, for sure. Now, as far as the sexes go, these are female. This one here, this one here, this one here. These are all females. This is a male. All right. There's another male. This whole bunch back here, I see 4 bloom stalks. Those are all male. This is a female. So the males start off much showier, but that's going to fizzle away to nothing within a month. Whereas this is going to keep getting longer and longer and longer. There's another female down there. All the way until the seeds are ready, which is, I usually collect these seeds about mid-October. So these are just going to keep stretching out. That clump of flowers is going to eventually be a foot or more in length. The little tiny seed pods all along the stem. Here, say, how long have I been messing with this plant? Probably 25 years. So maybe 25 years ago, there was not any. I mean, you can plant it in pots and so on, but really it's a lot easier to just let it do its thing and then come out here and dig up these little, once they get to this size, they're a lot easier to work with. So I can divide these and pop them up to sell or to transplant into other parts of the woods. Just try and protect them from the possibility of somebody coming through and wanting to harvest them all, which happens all the time. Not with Chamaelirium, because people aren't quite attuned to it yet, but soon enough there'll be people out in the woods digging it up. Once the word of its value spreads around amongst the people who go out in the woods and dig things up. At the moment, they're busy digging up stuff like ramps, or ginseng, of course. I'm not sure there's a good way to determine the age of individual plant, like you can with ginseng. With ginseng, you can look on the neck and count exactly how many years old it is. I don't believe there's any comparable thing about this one. Here's a nice little American ginseng, a little 3-prong. So let's look in here and see what we got. So right here I see a seedling, another seedling. Well, is that this one? Well, that might be the, yeah, that's this plant here. And there's this plant here. So let's see what this looks like. Of course, this is not, if you wanted to harvest this for medicinal purposes, this would not really be the right time of year to do it. You'd want to do it in the autumn when all the energy is back down in the root. But just for demonstration purposes. So one thing about growing this for sale, and it is by no means a get-rich-quick project. They're slow growing, they take a lot of work, and the roots never get all that big. But there is a lot of demand. As I said, most of the ethical herb companies do not handle this plant because they can't find any that's nursery grown. The plant is not federally endangered, but it is endangered in a number of states. The range of this plant is kind of the whole East Coast, Mississippi to the Atlantic, and Ontario down to the Gulf, although it's thought to be extinct in Ontario at this point. So if you go state by state, it's endangered in most of the peripheral states, like most of New England down to Delaware. And then on the other side over in Illinois, I believe it's pretty well threatened, considered threatened in New York State. And it's on the United Plant Savers list of at-risk medicinal herbs. So this has quite a few growing points here on this one. This is last year's foliage is finally starting to fade out. As I said, it's kind of evergreen. These leaves would have been there all winter. And now that the new leaves are up, these leaves are fading out. So if you do eventually establish a pretty big colony of this, the thing to do would be to just sell your males and produce as much seed as possible. My interest is primarily in producing seeds because there's so little seed on the market, and seed is required to propagate it. So if it's going to become threatened or endangered, we need more people growing it, and primary consideration there is to have seeds available. So you can see this is probably a pretty old plant. I don't know, I'd guess 10 years at least. And that's not a very big root. I might take that back to the house and rinse it off so you could see a little better exactly what it looks like, but that whole thing is just right there. And then, of course, when it's not going to weigh very much right now, and then as it dries, it's going to lose a considerable percentage of its weight. So in order to make a significant amount of money, you would need, I think, quite a large plantation of this stuff. I don't know if this could actually be divided. Possibly. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's about 5 growing points. It's got 4 flower stalks on it. So there's the plant. And as I said, it's really not very big. But what you could do, as I started to say, is harvest your males for sale. There seems to be usually at least 50% of them are male or more. Sometimes it seems like more of them are males. So if you're interested in increasing, you're going to want to get as much seed as possible, but you really don't need all these males. So that would be the item that you could sell. and I have no idea what you could sell this for. Nursery grown. I know there's considerable built-up demand for it, which is not being filled. As I said, very few sources. I haven't really looked online to see what's for sale, by whom, and what kind of prices, but that's the situation. So here's a nice male Chamaelirium luteum. So there's been a lot of research done on this plant. If you want to look for more information, I just did a quick search. And what did I come? Oh shoot! Did I leave it behind? Oh, here we go. I found a very nice monograph, 50-page monograph, on a site called core.ac.uk, associated with Open University. Conservation assessment for the fairy wand. So medicinally we call this false unicorn root, but as a wildflower the more common name for it is fairy wand, for obvious reasons. So that was a really nice PDF you could download, and then his bibliography has several more sites. One by somebody named Allard for, I think, the New England Wildflower Society or somebody like that. You know, there's plenty of information about propagation, cultivation, habitat, more than I can tell you. I'm going to try and summarize it all, but I'm just telling you what I know about it and my personal experience with it. And as I said, you supposedly can take pieces of this root, you know, quarter-inch thick slices, and it will propagate from that. It looks like it has a lot of adventitious buds here and here. I have not had any success with that. Some other people I know have great success with that and have no success with seeds. So you can try it both ways and see how you do with it. And we should be cultivating it because it is going to become increasingly threatened as the collectors find out what the price is on the stuff. The states that have the most stable populations of this are North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, southern Appalachians. It's getting threatened in the more northern states, more western states where it grows. But the heartland of the southern Appalachians, it seems to be in pretty good shape so far. So, yeah, search around online, see what you can find. Did you photograph all those right next to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're standing right in the middle of the densest population of it that I have at the moment. So, nice thing to mix into your ginseng plantings. All right, so these are the seed stalks of Chamaelirium luteum. If you wanted to increase your stock, there's two ways to do it, supposedly, either by seed or by root cuttings, and we'll demonstrate those. If you want to do it by seed, you're going to have to collect the seed. So these are the seed stalks. So this plant is dioecious. Each plant is going to be either male or female. And we will show you in the springtime, we'll make a video showing you how to distinguish those. But basically the male flowers disappear in the summertime, and the female flowers slowly they start off small, about as big as your finger, and they stretch out and stretch out and stretch out until they get pretty big like this. And then eventually they start to open up at the end. When the seed is ready to come out, these little pods start to open up, and it's usually quite late. This is one of the last seeds I collect in the year. About the same time the leaves are falling off the trees, these seeds are finally ready to, these stalks are finally ready to collect. They're going to be green all summer long. And you really want to wait till at least few of these pods start to open up. And then I pick them and bring them back and put them in a jar of water and wait for the rest of the ones to open up. What happens in the course of nature is that as the wind blows, the seeds fling out and are distributed by the wind. So I collected these rather late, and I think that these are probably mostly empty. But they have a few seeds left in them. So the easiest way is to wait until the pods are open and then just tap the seeds out. And then you get nice clean seeds. Alternatively, you can crunch up the whole thing, but then you're going to have to sift the seeds out from the husk. So what I do is like this, and I get some nice clean seed, which I then sell. I think I'm one of the only people selling seeds of this plant at this point in time. Although we do trade quite a bit of it to Strictly Medicinal out in Oregon, and so they sell it as well. I'm not sure who else is selling this. I primarily raise this plant in order to get seeds because there's such a shortage of seeds on the market. So once the pods are open, these will shake out, and as I said, we're getting very little seed here because it's already come out. The wind has already blown the seeds out of here as the thing waves around. The seeds are a little bit wind carried. I think this third one might still have quite a bit in it. Let's try this one. I'm a little doubtful. Yeah, there's a few seeds in there still. So what I do is like this and get out nice clean seed to sell, and then I crunch up all the rest of it and broadcast that in my garden. That's what I use for planting myself, is the seed that's not so nice and clean. But if you want to get nice clean seeds, this is the way to do it. This one looks like it might actually have more, yeah. So let's break this in half like this. Yeah, quite a bit of seed still left in this one. So as I said, this is about the last seed I collect. Usually when the leaves are coming down towards the end of October, but these I didn't find until in December. So most of the seed had already gone out of them. That's pretty good. And then what I'll do is go back, like I said, I'll crunch all this up and plant that for myself. Just broadcast that out in the woods. So that is how you get the seeds out of Chamaelirium luteum. So we're going to plant the seeds. This is February 20th. Typically I would have planted them sooner. We're a little bit behind on everything this year. But this seed, I believe, requires a period of cold in order to germinate. Quite a lot of things do. And if you don't know whether something requires what's called stratification, there's a couple ways we could do it. You could just mix the seeds with sand and put it in the ice box for a month. Or alternatively, you could just plant the seed in pots like we're going to do and just expose those to the weather so that they're going to get a month of, I think it wants to be below 40 degrees, something like that. If you don't know, I just would assume that any native plant coming from here or some other place where they have a hard winter, even if it doesn't require cold stratification, it's certainly going to tolerate it. So you could just assume, just go ahead and give it cold stratification. It might help, and it's not going to hurt. So we happen to have quite a lot of seed of this. So I'm just sprinkling a bunch in the pot. And we're using a kind of a woodland mix, but it's commercial, so it's probably sterile. Be nicer to make my own mix, but my own mix would be full of weeds. seeds probably. So once these germinate and get a little bit of size on them, we will put them into our own growing mix, which is mostly composed of bark and rotted leaf mold and so on. So these are late to germinate. We'll try and make another little videos when they start to come up, which is typically not until late May or June. A lot of people plant these and then they give up on them and throw the pot away. Don't do that. Hang on to it, and it's even conceivable that some of them could germinate next year. Although on this particular seed, I think that's not all that likely. But they do come up late. So you want to. So then if you want to, I'm just going to put them in my cold greenhouse on the floor where I think they'll get plenty of cold weather, but alternatively, or if you didn't have a greenhouse or something, you could just put these outdoors. But then what you have to worry about sort of when you do that is, I mean, then you won't have to worry about watering them if they're outdoors, but you do have to worry about like pounding rainstorms and so on. So you want to protect them in some way. What I've done in the past is put this kind of very fine gravel called chicken grit, which you can buy at a feed and seed store, and that helps protect them. Just put like a 1/8 to 1/4 inch of that gravel over the top. And that also helps cut down a little bit on the moss and so on that colonizes the flats. My understanding is that this plant has two kinds of dormancy. Delayed ripening of the embryo was one of them, and then possibly some germination inhibitors. The science of seed germination is pretty new. It was just kind of a hobbyist thing for the longest time. You know, people that grow weird stuff, experimenting with learning how to grow it. But then with the passage of the Endangered Species Act, when the government was mandated to preserve certain plants, all of a sudden there became a lot of research money available to actually figure out how to germinate these seeds and what the mechanisms were that controlled when seeds would germinate. Obviously, seeds have mechanisms to make them germinate when they're supposed to. If they just all germinated when they fell down and hit the ground, well, a lot of times that's in October, and then they would come up and freeze. So there has to be some controls to prevent them from doing that. So that's the topic of a lot of research, and I think if you go looking online, you can probably find a research paper about the germination of Chamaelirium. I used to have one before all my information of that sort burned up in a fire a year ago. Very good book on seed ecology, talking about the way that the germination requirements are related to the ecology of the situation where the plant is growing. Fascinating subject. So these are, I think at this point, maybe 3 years old. I usually wait 2 years. When they germinate, they're very, very tiny, and you really don't want to mess with them. Just let them go for a whole year at least before you try and separate them out. So this year, we're going to get probably 20 of these out of this pot. So this is the same thing we're doing again here. So this is getting towards the end of May, and we're seeing the Chamaelirium just now beginning to germinate. These are little seedlings just popping up. and I expect to see more. We filled the whole pot. So it's slow to germinate, in other words. But these were sown pretty thickly. These are, I think at this point, 3 years old. So I would, when you have a pot like this that germinates, I would not do anything with it for minimally a year, but better 2 years before they have enough of a root to where you can try and separate them out. They're very tiny roots at this point, and even these are really pretty small. We were thinking about separating these out, but I decided to just put the whole little pot into a bigger pot with some more soil and let it go for even another year. And then this autumn or next spring, we'll try and separate these. That's a very delicate operation. Of course, you could try and plant them in 6-packs with just one seed in each cell, but then there's all issues of watering too much or not watering enough. We actually killed a whole bunch of these by letting them get too dried out. So it will germinate from seeds, and it germinates pretty well, but it's a little bit tricky. It takes some attention.